What's up, Eric? How you
Hi,
doing?
buddy. How you doing?
Not well. Not
you
well.
sound
but
good.
I will fake it till I make it tonight.
That's all we got to do.
Yeah.
That's the name of the game.
So first off, welcome everybody to the Contagion Effect Show, where we talk to some of our wonderful veterans, talk about mental health, things of that nature, while security's in the background.
They're patrolling,
playing.
bro.
Yeah,
It's a week and a couple days before Christmas. They're patrolling.
Well, it's with me being down again. They haven't got quite the walks, and then the rain that we had, so they're a little more hyper at home right now.
They're a little excited around H-U-G.
Oh, Please don't do that.
S-O-N.
So I do want to apologize up front to everybody. I am going to be coughing. I'm going to be trying to mute my microphone the best. I already apologized to our guest talking to him because I feel horrible that I'm as bad as I am, but I couldn't cancel tonight. It just wasn't going to.
We would have done it. We would have made it work, right? And
I don't know how. That's what you're going to start counting them.
I don't know if I have enough pages.
So I have to ask you, where were you Saturday?
So in lieu of actually going home, getting some sleep, the first ever state title championship football game held at Houston Memorial Stadium between the Muir Mustangs of Pasadena, who has a population of about 205,000 people, take on the Division 6 section champs Houston Husky.
But it was a Division 5 AA, which we were at the top of Division 5.
And I knew you'd correct that. And they took on the Mustangs of Muir and
yeah. Oh, wait. What's the population of Houston? 8,000?
8,000
versus a town with
205. That's just Pasadena itself. It's Pasadena, bro.
Yeah. But they did. Pasadena High School has a bigger high school than Muir.
Look, you play who you play. Right?
Now, how was the weather?
The weather outside was frightful. It was frightful. I didn't wear pants, but I did put on socks and shoes.
Yeah.
So
thank you for that.
So that's like wearing pants. And holy crap, like it.
No, we had so to set the tone. We had we started the game with sideways rain. It was windy. It was pouring rain.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite part was, this team came in saying they were going to beat us by 20, and we play on a grass field, which a lot of Southern California they play on turf.
They got that.
They got all turf. That nice turf. They got money for turf, and here in the Central Valley of California,
we just got a bunch of weeds and dirt.
We got almonds.
We got some trees.
We got nut trees. We got almonds and walnuts, right? Unfortunately, those don't put a turf field on our fields, so which we don't want anyways. But it ended up turning into a mud bowl.
It was beautiful, man.
Their running back could not get any traction.
First play from scrimmage. Fumble.
Yeah, fumble.
It was exciting. It was exciting. It was a defensive battle. I believe there was 6 fumbles, 4 interceptions.
We had safety, all the interceptions.
I think we only threw the ball like 4 times.
No, we threw the ball 3 times.
3 times. One completion.
Oh. One would have been a touchdown, and
the other one would have been the first down to extend the drive. But
exactly.
Hey, I loved it. Run.
It was
some more. Run.
And then their quarterback was throwing a shot put out there, like he was just throwing up lame ducks.
Just go get it. Go get it.
And we didn't understand why did they keep throwing? Like it was so crazy.
Yeah.
So fun night.
It was
son,
exciting.
my 17-year-old, you guys have heard us talk. He's looking at going into the Air Force. So now that football's over, we can get focused on that once we get him healthy, because he does have RSV right now. So
added to the laundry list of left flexor, right flexor, an ankle, a shoulder, a knee, elbow.
We taped him together and put him out on the field. I gave him a hug right before the game. He came out. He's all, man, this is miserable. And I'm like, I gave him a hug. I said, dude, this is the last 2 hours of football. I love you, and just go give it your all and win a state championship. And he did.
And he had some of the nice blocks. I was specifically
and he was going against
big boy.
One kid that was a 3-star.
He was big boy.
And the other kid was 6'1", 320 or 30 pounds.
Yeah.
And my kid's 5'9", 230. So
and red hair. So that offsets everything else.
Well, and that's one of the things for our team, dude. We have We actually have 4 redheads.
I said it to Liam's dad. I said, dude, it's got to be the red hair effect, man.
It's where do you find 4 redheads on the same football team?
The athleticism is just, I mean, and again, like, was it pretty? No, but they got the job done and they did what they had to do when they had to do it. And that literally is how this team was ever since Ripon, when they went up like 14-0, came
21-0.
Well, yeah, okay, so it's 21-0, and then they hang on 21-19. Every single game from there on out was decided within the last minute of the game.
Yeah, well, I knew this game when we were up 9-0 at halftime because we scored a touchdown, and then we ended up getting a safety.
The takeaway going in, I was like, "Oh, that could have been the swinger."
Yeah, but I knew. I was like, and Cody and I, my oldest son, talk. We were like, "Oh, they're gonna score because we can't win by more than 4 points."
Yeah.
In the playoffs, we hadn't done it, so we weren't going to win by more than 4 points. So it was going to be what it was going to be.
I labeled them the cardiac kids back in Ripon. So
well, they're calling them the heart attack Huskies because they got to do the H's. But I like cardiac kids better, anyways. So
it was fun, entertaining.
Well, let's move on. Let's hear from our good friend Tamara to pay the bill.
Cheers,
and then we'll come back to our awesome guest.
Now for our sponsor, Tamara Pulido with the Finance Group, where they're creating a future where everyone has access to the loan and home they love. Whether you're a veteran, law enforcement, a first-time home buyer, you're up or downsizing, or even if you need to just refinance, our community deserves proficiency and expertise. Better rates, faster close, welcome home. Tamara Pulido, NMLS 1655776. Again, that's Tamara Pulido, and her phone number is 209-204-3795.
All right. Now, next to having our guests, my favorite part of the show, let's get a little Scotty Hastings going to pump us up.
Yeah, the times and places, they may change, but one thing stays the same. The stories that they tell about going through hell. If you think they wouldn't do it all over again, well, you just don't know them. The memories that they own of the ones who didn't make it home, yeah, sure do miss them, but they keep them all living in the stories that they tell.
Yeah, and we're gonna get some stories right now.
We're gonna get some stories.
We're gonna get some great stories. So, would you like to do the honors?
I would. As everyone knows, when I go on and I'm looking for guests for the Contagion Effects show, there's certain things that I look for, and this gentleman.
There's criteria.
Yeah, there's a little bit. There's about 3 things, but on my list of 7 things, he checked off about 9 of them. Right off the bat, obviously, Army veteran. Excuse us. Army veteran, served 6 years in the Connecticut Army National Guard, including a deployment into Afghanistan, 2012-ish, right? But before that, he became a father, a husband, and he just grew up in a military family and law enforcement and all that stuff. And so as I was going through things, I'm like, got to get him. I mean, he has a podcast, right? Drive On Podcast, wherever you can find it, go subscribe, YouTube, check it out.
Post it.
And we'll have the links on ours too. But again, like Scotty says, the stories that they tell outside of his story, just what he's doing to bring awareness in the after deployment life.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. I mean, he's been on multiple podcasts, a ton of different shows. But without further ado, I want to introduce Scott DeLuzio. Scotty, welcome. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to say Scotty. Scott DeLuzio.
we're just used to Scotty.
I have a habit of doing
Scotty works.
And what's funny, Scott, is that Scotty is actually an Army, and he was Afghanistan too.
Mm-hmm.
Only difference is he did end up getting shot 10 times by the same guy. And now he's a country. We're hoping he's going to become a huge mega country music star because we love him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
that's awesome.
pretty
I mean, not awesome getting shot, obviously.
No,
That's a terrible thing, but awesome what he's doing after the fact, right? Coming
Yeah,
back and
absolutely.
doing all that.
And that's his thing, as he said. He goes, look, if I didn't get shot, my hands wouldn't be in this spot to be able to hold the guitar and strum the guitar in a certain way. Right. I mean, he has that outlook of you have to suck getting shot 10 times. Yeah, absolutely.
He called it a really bad day.
Yeah, really bad day, so
Yeah.
no, but welcome to the show. We want to just kind of start off by, I don't want to say
I'll do it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, you do it. Because
Eric sometimes he takes things and runs.
So what did you have for Christmas dinner last year? Basically is how it goes with me. I have Mikey's a good, like I said, Mikey's a good interviewer, and he has a list, a step progression, as you will.
Yeah. If you've seen Up, Squirrel.
Yeah.
That's Eric.
That's me.
Sometimes. But he's so passionate about it also. That's why it'll never drive me crazy. It's there. So welcome to the show, Scott. As Eric spoke and you're wearing it, you are the host of the Drive On podcast. So you kind of understand our world. You've been doing it a little bit longer than us. You have a lot more expertise. We're still learning as we go and trying to get better and better each show. So
yeah.
And that's I think the name of the game. I think I'm still learning as I go too. When I first started the podcast, I did not have a clue what I was doing as far as the technology side of thing goes or anything like that. And if you go back and listen to the first few episodes, it's probably not the best quality or anything like that. But as time has gone on, I've learned a few things, made some improvements, and I think that's really the name of the game. With no matter what you're doing,
right,
just keep trying to get a little bit better. Do one thing, it doesn't work out. Okay, cool. Try something else.
Well, your website's amazing. I will tell you that. I do love your. Oops, sorry about that.
Did you get it too?
So that's Joey Edibles, who's another podcaster.
Yeah.
So thank you, Joey, for joining us.
Well, you had brought up the beginning of the podcast. I think the smartest thing that he did was there's about, I think he did about 6 or 7 episodes of telling your story, letting people know who you were. And then you're like, hey, listen, I can sit and talk about it all the time, but I need people to join me. Right. The smartest thing that he did, the number one smart, he brought his wife on as the first one. The first guest.
We've already gone wrong.
We've been in it for a year and a month, but he brought his wife on. She got to tell.
She got to tell her perspective.
Exactly. So and that's what I like about the podcast. It's not just from the veteran point of view. It brings everything. I mean, he's got some guests that were.
It's all his, Joey.
Yeah.
And then the flag, you'll hear the story about the flag in a little bit.
Yeah, we're going to get on it. Joey's got a good little thing going too. But getting back to the Drive On podcast, it's 2 episodes a weekish, okay, give or take. Yep. One is about a 45-minute, and it seems that the second one's maybe 10, 15 minutes. Like, hey, still here, still doing our thing. Just want to give you an update. Remember me, Drive On podcast with Scott DeLuzio. Check it out. So that's actually
both episodes are full length episodes. Are not, neither one of them is
shorter than the other. Okay.
I tried. I mean, obviously some are going to be a little bit longer or shorter than the others, but I try to shoot it for at least a half hour to 45 minutes or so for all the episodes. So they all fall right in that ballpark there,
right?
Somewhere around there. So, but it's honestly, when you brought up, having my wife on, when I started the podcast, I barely let anybody know. It was like my wife and I knew for like the first half a dozen episodes or so that I had a podcast, which in hindsight, that's not the best way to launch a podcast. It's actually the worst way to launch a podcast.
Yeah. How was your audience though? Like, was it just like, you just put it out there and say, hey, whoever's going to find it?
Well, at first that was what I did. Cause I was like, I don't know how long I'm going to do this. This could be something that I do for, 6, 7, 8 episodes and then it's done. And I don't want people being like, where's the rest of it? Like, keep going with it. And, if it was something I just wasn't into, I didn't want to put it out there. Right. So, after I kind of got a little more comfortable with it and realized that this was something I kind of enjoyed doing and I wanted to do more of it. That's when I started putting it out there. And I, obviously you start with friends and family, right? You post on Facebook and, get those people. And everyone was, super supportive of the podcast at that point. But yeah, you need to start branching out and reaching out to more people. The first episode that I did was or the first episodes that I did were all people that I knew. So obviously starting with my wife, but other people who I either knew from living in my neighborhood who were veterans, or people I served with, or things like that. Those were the people I brought in because it was really easy to reach out to them and ask them to be on the show. But then they started suggesting people to me, and then other people started reaching out to me, and it just started growing from there, which was kind of awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because Joey too, because he started around 2019 as well, and that's what he said. He's all, I told everyone, and I think we tried to. I mean, we tried to tell everyone.
I bombed out. I mean, I literally bombarded Facebook with everything. I was
everywhere
sharing,
you went.
everywhere
you told
I
everything.
went. Yeah, and I still don't have business cards, which I'm really. I have like 1,000 stickers, but they're like that long.
I'm gonna just give you the QR code and make the QR code. You just carry that around. Well, so Scott, we've learned a lot about you from trying to do a little bit of research. You're everywhere, so there is a lot to read about you, and we could probably tell part of your story, which Eric's
I don't want to get into his story yet.
I know, but I do. We want to learn who you are, what you're about, where you kind of came from, right? So
sure.
Where were you born? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Connecticut.
Okay.
Lived there all my life up until about 9 years ago when we moved out here to Arizona, where I am now. Met my wife there. Had my actually all three of my kids were born in Connecticut, and we moved out here shortly after my youngest son was born. It was maybe 4 or 5 months after he was born, we moved out here. So, while he was born there, he doesn't really remember it too much, other than a couple times we've traveled back there just to visit family and all that kind of stuff. Grew up in typical suburban town. We mom was a school teacher. My dad was a businessman. He was a executive at a company nearby, and we were brought up in a very patriotic family. We were brought up to respect all the people who put on a uniform day after day to protect us, whether it's police officers, firefighters, EMTs, military, you name it. We were brought up to respect those people.
Yeah.
And so that was just the way we were raised. We have videos of my little brother. He was we were like holding an American flag, and he's singing the national anthem before he really even knew all the words.
Nice.
And so it's it was I don't know, he was maybe 3 or 4 years old.
American family.
Exactly. But that's the type of family that we grew up in. So
okay.
Now, do you think that's because it's East Coast? And I always feel like, man, I'm gonna ruffle some feathers if anyone listens. Is it? I feel like colonial United States, like I feel like they get a little more patriotic.
Do you?
I really feel that way.
You're also, I mean, without getting too political, we're also in the state we're in, right? So that's where I think
right. I mean, the 13 colonies and all that stuff,
not
right?
That part of the state. We're in,
no, we're in the valley. No. Listen, we fly our flags, and I get all that. I'm just saying, like, it's an East Coast 13 colonies type of thing. Like, I always feel like there's like patriotism is like higher in the East.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
maybe
they're at the heart.
I haven't really thought of it.
Yeah.
I mean yeah.
You're not, but that's,
we're gonna make you think on this show today.
It's not because you're not the first guest to kind of talk like that. So it makes sense what you're saying.
Yeah. Whoa.
Sure.
Yeah. Go write that down too. So real quick is there was
the son
when he started. Yeah. Well, when he started talking about the podcast, he's like, I remember you were talking about, you asked your son, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? Right. Do you remember that? Do you remember the story? Do you remember what he said? You asked your son what he wanted to be. He said he wanted to be a bubble maker.
Oh yeah. And that was like one of the most bizarre answers. I was like, I'm not even sure where to go with that. Like,
how old was he?
He was like preschool, like 4 or 5, something like that. Yeah. So
usually they even have that policeman type thing, or fireman type
bubble
thing.
Maker. I'm like,
bubble maker,
dude.
Well, the thing was, like, all the other kids in his class had those typical answers. I want to be a policeman. I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a doctor. I want to be, something like that, right? he was the only one with this off the wall, bizarre, bubble maker. I was like, what the heck? What is that?
So
did he give any background of why he said it?
I have his background in my head. This is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm thinking that his son was thinking. Listen, my parents have always brought me around law enforcement and firemen and first responders. And I know them people. I know them. I know first responders. And I think his son was like, listen, I see him all the time. I want to be a bubble maker, where these other kids probably don't get that exposure of law enforcement or first responders. They want to go be, they want to be them.
That's a good thought.
Maybe. That's two. Shoot, Mike, I'm on a roll. Got two.
Don't stop making me laugh though, because all right. So Scott, grew up wholesome family in Connecticut. I obviously reading all the different things. You started to go to college, right? And and then you kind of made a change. So did you finish college?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
So I started going to college, and I was in college before 9/11, and I was in college while 9/11 happened. Like I was actually on my way to a class when the planes were hitting. And so after the dust settled, if you will, and I kind of like realized what was going on, I had one of those moments where I was like, okay, this is I'm approaching it like a fork in the road here. Like, do I keep going with college, or do I drop out and join the military? What do I do? And I figured I was already a good way through my degree. I was close enough to finishing. I was like, I might as well just stay in and finish it, because knowing myself, if I stopped at that point, I was not going back to school. So I figured, at least let me get my degree out of the way, and if there's still a war at that point after another year or two, then I'll think about joining at that point. So I graduated in 2004, and I graduated in 2004. I started working my first job out of college a couple months later, and my younger brother Stephen, he joined the Vermont Army National Guard sometime that fall. I forget exactly when it was, October maybe that fall.
And he had gone to school too. He was also...
Yeah, he was in school. He was actually going to a school up in Vermont, and to Norwich University. It's like a military academy kind of thing. And he met a guy up there who was in the National Guard. He started talking to him about it, and he was like, yeah, this sounds like what I want to do. And so he joined the Guard. And all of a sudden, my younger brother, who I used to beat up in the backyard, and we used to horse around and get in all sorts of crazy trouble, he became one of these guys that I was looking up to as a kid. Like overnight, he became that guy. And I was super, super proud of him for making that decision. It was like beyond proud as far as I was concerned. And then, I don't know, 6 months or so later, I started hearing these reports in the news that the military was struggling to meet their recruiting numbers for the year. And that just got under my skin. And I was like, how could this happen? Like, just a few years ago, people were willing to move mountains to go get some payback for what happened on 9/11. Right. And now we can't even find people to join the military. Like, what's going on here? And I said, where are all those people? And then at that point, I realized, like, I was one of those people. Like, I was considering doing it, but I still hadn't done anything yet. And so I thought to myself, I'm still young enough. I'm fit enough. I'm perfectly capable. I have nothing but poor excuses why I'm not joining the military right now. So why not me? And so that's when I decided to join. And
now, were you married at this time already, or?
I was not. No.
Okay.
I actually had not yet even met my wife at this point. So, I just decided, this was for me. This was going to be something I was going to do. I had just started my first professional job out of college, and so I was just a few months in on that, and I didn't really want to burn any bridges with that. So I decided to go National Guard like my brother did. So that way I could stay close to home. I train 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. I could still keep that other job and everything like that. So that's why I went National Guard as opposed
Makes
to
sense.
active duty. And so that's really how I decided to get into the military.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, there and he brought up a point and that he didn't know that he's not going to get fired from his job, and because it's protected.
Right.
Right.
So if you're going, which you had brought up, right? Because I think that's kind of a stigmatism too for some people. Is like, well, I don't want to quit my job or get fired because I'm going to go be in the military.
Get protected time to go.
And now, and so it was ironic that you brought that up. We have a kid at my job that has the same situation. I'm like, no, dude, like you're protected. Like they have to give you time off. So,
right. And that's one of those things that I did not know at the time. I decided to join anyways. And I said, you know what, if they fire me, they fire me. And so be it. I'll find another job later on, or maybe I'll just go active duty if that's the case.
Well, and at that point you were already looking forward to like, I got to do this now. So nothing else.
So it was happening one way or the other. It didn't really matter to me. The only thing that would have stopped me was like, a physical issue that I didn't know about, or, some other disqualifying, condition or whatever. But luckily that didn't become an issue.
Yeah.
Now I'm not as versed on National Guard as, with all the other services. Do you have a basic?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the same basic training as active duty. As a matter of fact, there are active duty people in the basic training with us. There's no difference when you are National Guard versus active duty. When you're in basic training, nobody knows the difference. There's no different uniforms or anything like that. You're in.
Melvin.
Yeah, we actually had another National Guardsman who ended up getting deployed as well, and he actually had another, I think, an Army like captain or something, kind of start talking, running his mouth to him, and he's like, "Sir, if you don't mind, those bullets, they hurt us just like they hurt you." So it was like, dude, what a great point.
Yeah, Melvin.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you end up joining. Where was your basic at?
It was Fort Benning, Georgia. So it was down there for
sorry, that was my fault.
Okay, Fort Benning. I'm not sure where I cut out. I was Fort Benning, Georgia. I was down there,
Benning, Georgia,
for a few months, and at the time, my brother, he had actually deployed to Iraq just before I left for basic training.
Oh wow!
And he was, the unit he was in was already over there. He was just going over there to kind of augment their numbers. They had a few injuries and a few killed in action where they had to kind of plus up their numbers. So he went over there to be one of those guys to do that. So he was there for I want to say about 6 months.
And what was his MOS?
He was infantry as well.
Okay.
So we both were infantry. So when he was over there, he was in Ramadi in 2005, which was just a really hotbed. It was probably at the time one of the most dangerous places in the world to be. They were getting shot at all the time. Their vehicles were getting blown up and all sorts of stuff. And he had all sorts of stories from that deployment. It was pretty rough.
Wow.
And when he came home, it just happened to be like a week or two before my basic training graduation. And so I wasn't expecting to see him for a little while because I didn't know exactly when he was going to be coming home, but it was an awesome surprise to see him at my basic training graduation when he came out there.
Oh, so you had no clue he showed up? He was showing up?
Yeah, I got a little hint from his fiance, who had, I forget exactly how it went, if she sent me a letter or something like that saying that he was going to be home, but it was like just towards the end. So it was like I didn't have any clue for the majority of the time, but it was like right towards the end, like the last week or two or something like that. I think where I ended up finding out that he was coming home. It was supposed to be a big surprise, but it kind of got a little ruined, but it was okay. It was all
nice
good. It was so happy to see him.
Right.
So
you do your basic training, and then you kind of go back to work until you have to do your duty. And was it
so you
once
come
a
back,
month?
Yeah, you do 1 weekend a month and then 2 weeks a year for the training. And so outside of that, everything else is just like your normal, regular civilian life. You don't live on a base anywhere. You live wherever you want. You work your regular job, and you just have the weekends where you have to go off and do your Army training. So
right. Now I read that you ended up in Afghanistan.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So,
that was in 2010, and that was let's see, that came about just about 2 months after my youngest son, or my oldest son, was born.
Okay. So you're married by now, and
I was married for a little over a year at that point, and then my son was born, and then I just up and left, and I was in Afghanistan. And so I can only imagine, like,
I don't think you chose to, right?
Yeah.
Well, no, in a way I did, because that was a job I chose. I chose to do that, right? And I knew that at some point I was going to be deployed. But just thinking about my wife at home with this newborn, like she was a new mother. She wasn't a mother before this, and just trying to figure out how to be a mom and trying to figure out what to do and all that kind of stuff by herself. It was, and I know there's a lot of single moms out there who do that all the time, but it's still now she also had the worry of her husband being deployed and that kind of stuff. So it was just hard on her. So
not easy.
And my brother Stephen, he was also deployed to Afghanistan at the same time, or thereabouts.
Really close, right?
A few weeks. Yeah. So we both of our units. So he was in the Vermont Army National Guard, and I was in the Connecticut Army National Guard. And while we were in two separate units, they all fell under the same brigade. And so it was a brigade-wide deployment. That's why we all were deployed over there. We were stationed on separate bases in Afghanistan, but the deployment schedules lined up pretty closely within a few weeks of each other. So so once, like, I had seen him a few times in the train up that we did before going to Afghanistan. We were in Indiana and in Camp Atterbury. And so we saw each other a few times there. Actually, the night that I left Camp Atterbury to go off doing some other training was the last night I saw him. I just happened to catch up with him in the chow hall. We had dinner together, and so that was kind of a memorable thing for me. But then, I didn't see him again after that. We never crossed paths again, unfortunately.
So would you like to share that story? Because Scott does have a book. It is called Surviving Son, and it does tell this story. There you go. I put that picture on our thumbnail because I just thought that was an amazing. I mean, just my I mean, I'm getting goosebumps again just looking at it, because it's just like you don't even have to open the pages yet, and you already get that emotion of what that picture tells you. So
and if you go to survivingsonbook.com, you can order it there.
Or Amazon. We'll post it.
We'll post it on there.
We'll post it with the show notes, because it's definitely another one of those stories.
Yeah, I'm an audiobook guy, so I mean,
Eric loves audiobooks, and he would literally tell us the whole story. But tonight,
I'm not going to do that.
We're going to let you tell the
because
story.
I learned from the last time that we had a gentleman on that was an author.
When I didn't have a voice, we had another author on, and Eric was like, "Yeah," and then you did this. I'm like, "Dude, let him tell the story." He loves it. I mean,
I do want to make one point. I do appreciate that it's in his voice, so you get that picture and you get that sound and
it's come from an audiophile guy. I mean, he's
but some people would
audiophile guy.
Yeah, but it's like if I wrote a book and you read it, though, you know what I'm saying? Like you get that emotion, you get that feeling.
I think he could only convey it the best, because you hear the other voices and they're like, and then this happened, and then to hear his emotion,
robotic almost, right?
Yes. So
I'm just saying, the last book that I listened to,
well,
Chris Whittemore's book was read by somebody else.
Right. No, I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. Go get it. $17.99.
So first off, before we jump too much into it, where were you guys stationed in Afghanistan? Where were you? Where was he?
Yeah, we're both in the eastern part of the country. I was in an area called Torkham. It was right on the Pakistan border. Our base was, I think, about 2 miles from the Pakistani border. He was in Paktia province, which was, I want to say it was about 80 or 90 miles away from where I was. Which, if you think about 80 or 90 miles, like around here in the US, like you can get in the car and you could drive that, but that's nothing, right? But that would take days to get that far.
So were those more the mountainous
and everything?
Yeah,
those were the more the mountainous areas that you see
Yeah.
all the crazy videos
Well,
of?
plus all the IEDs and everything else that I mean,
Right.
It's nothing.
You're capping 10
Nobody's
miles.
friendly.
Yeah.
And
10 miles a day was
Exactly.
probably a good trot.
Right. So yeah, our mission in Afghanistan, we were there for primarily like a border security mission, where the border crossing was, where we were. About 80% of NATO supplies came through that border crossing.
Oh, wow.
So for people who aren't familiar with Afghanistan, the country is a landlocked country, so there's no ports or anything like that. So anything that was shipped on cargo ships usually came in through Pakistan, got put on trucks, and then driven into Afghanistan through Torkham, where we were. And so we were there to make sure that first off, the Pakistanis kept the border open and allowed the trucks to pass through, because as much as people told us at the time that the Pakistanis were our allies, they did not treat us like allies. They were not very friendly.
Opportunistic.
We actually had one guy who we were walking like along the border, like there literally was a line painted on the ground, like,
wow,
Afghanistan, Pakistan is like, over this line, and one of our guys stepped foot over the line, and he got the buttstock of a Pakistani soldier's rifle right to the face, just to push him back. Yeah, so there was no friendliness going on with them over there. And I wouldn't doubt, I don't know for sure, but I wouldn't doubt that some of those guys were, in the pocket of the Taliban or whatever. So it was not the nicest thing, but we're there almost as a show of force, just so that they would keep the border open.
Yeah.
But also to make sure that there were no, attacks on the border area itself, to allow the vehicles to come through and have safe passage into the country, and then, carry on their way to wherever their destination was. But it was a tough job. At times it seemed kind of boring, but you never knew. We had so much vehicle and pedestrian traffic coming through. You never knew when one of those could be carrying a bomb or wanting to attack you in some way. And it was like you were always on your toes, head on a swivel, looking around, making sure that you knew what was going on around you and everything,
Well, just seeing some of the, like, I've seen some of the videos, and I think there's a YouTube video out there where there's a guy up on a truck, and a car keeps coming close, and he's yelling like, "Stop, remember, stop!" Like, I'm gonna shoot you if you don't stop. And then finally they had some other soldiers come and like go to the car and say stop, because he just kept coming up on them. But I couldn't. I mean, living like that mindset is just the stress is kind of crazy. But I don't know. Do you guys feel like did you feel like it felt like stress? Like, or was it just this different awareness?
Get used to it, right?
In a way, you sort of do get used to it, because like at first, like day one, day one was like the most stressful day, because you didn't know what to expect.
Right.
You're walking around there. It's like the training that you do is like, be prepared to be shot at any second. And so when you're walking around this brand new area, you don't know the terrain, you don't know the buildings, you don't know the people who are around there. Like, and it's not like the enemy was exactly wearing a uniform that said, "Hey, look, I'm the bad guy." They wore the same clothes as everyone else. So day one, when you're walking out there, you're completely unfamiliar with everything, and you are like just super hyper alert and aware of every little thing that is going around you. I don't want to say that you get complacent over time, because you got to keep up that same level of intensity. But you start to learn what is normal in a certain area. You start to learn, like oh, those people, like I see them all the time. They work in this market. Not to say that they couldn't, turn around and attack you, but you kind of get to know some of the things that are going on around
vehicles,
the area,
things like that.
Yeah, and in a way, it's good because you're not looking at everything as a threat. You're looking for the abnormalities, and those are the things that are more likely to come out and bite you. And there were a few times when we had people who came through who definitely didn't look like they belonged there, and they just had there was a sense to them, you just knew that something was off. And so those are the people that you go and you stop and you try to figure out what's going on and everything like that. So
now, did you have any crazy situations? I'm sure you had a few, right?
There were a few. Actually, I'll get to this a little bit later, but after I came home, so our unit was still there, and I was home. The border crossing area, the Torcom border crossing, I want to say maybe 2 or 3 weeks after I was home, was on CNN because it was the border had gotten shut down by the Pakistanis, and the vehicles were just backed up for miles, and there was like hundreds and hundreds of trucks just sitting there waiting to cross into Pakistan or vice versa. And it was just so many vehicles. We had a few times when the Afghan army decided to just show up kind of unannounced, and they weren't like wearing they didn't always wear like the most uniform of uniforms. Right. Like they had uniforms, but they didn't all wear the same thing all the time. Like some of them had their top off, they're just wearing a t-shirt, or they're just wearing whatever. And so you see a bunch of guys with AK-47s and RPGs start walking towards you, and it's like,
game
okay, what's going on?
Who are you?
And so luckily we didn't light those guys up, but but there were other times. There was one time, and I've talked about this in the book too, where I was faced with a decision of whether or not to shoot a kid, and he was on the back of one of the trucks. We called them jingle trucks because they had these like chains and bells and stuff hanging off the side. They always jingled as they drove down the street. But he was in the back of one of these trucks, and I was about maybe 50 yards away from him at the time, and he stood up in the back and he pointed down what looked to me like a rifle at the guys the American soldiers who were down below him. And unless they were looking right up, they wouldn't have seen him. And, I had a pretty clear shot. I could have shot at him and probably killed him. It was a moving target, but it wasn't that far. I've hit moving targets at that distance before. And so I was pretty confident that I'd be able to hit him. And I raised the rifle up. I was ready to shoot, and something told me just take a second look before you pull the trigger. And my finger was on the trigger, safety was off. I was ready to go. I was actually starting to pull the trigger, and I took a second look, and I recognized that the rifle that he was holding, it was all uniform in color. Like it was all the same wood color, like the same, like the wood that you would get at Home Depot if you're building a deck or something. It was all that color. And I was like, I've never seen a rifle like all the same color. Like you at least have like a metal barrel that's like a blackish color or something like that, right? Or silver even. Like you don't have everything looking like a piece of wood. And I realized this kid is holding a piece of wood that's carved to look like an AK-47. And I almost killed this kid. And so like those are the things like you had to always be on your toes because you never knew when one of those things could have been legit. And there were things like that. There's other instances like that too, but those types of things will stick with you. Like even to this day, I still have these issues where I will just like drift off, and I kind of have a flashback of that moment where I feel like I'm standing there pointing my rifle at this kid. He was probably, I don't know, 10 or so years old. Like that.
That's not even, it's just not real life when you sit there and you think about it. That's nothing you should ever be faced with. I mean, that's the sadness of it.
No, and honestly, just before that happened, I had thought of myself as the type of person who would do anything to protect kids, like young, innocent kids. I felt like I'm that type of person. I'm going to protect them. And then, you know, here I was pointing a rifle, ready to pull the trigger and ready to kill this kid. I totally like twisted my own view of myself. And,
Right.
you know, and that's something I think a lot of times like civilians don't necessarily understand, or, you know, really anybody who hasn't been in that position, doesn't have to be a civilian, that these things happen. And it's awful when these types of things happen, even though it turned out okay. Like the kid was fine.
Right.
I don't know, you know, what happened to the kid eventually over time, but like that day, at least he was fine. But, you know, it easily could have gone the other way.
You already had your son, right? And I don't know if you had any more by that time. That I mean, I can't fathom it, but just thinking about it, it's never a spot, you know, and to think now on the streets of our own country, you're dealing with stuff like that now, and police having to make those types of decisions. So it's just it's mind-boggling to have to sit there and point your gun at a 10-year-old. You know, I just got my CCW, so going through all that training, I'm like, wow, it totally changes your perspective on just the use of a gun, and what you had to do is just it's unthinkable. So so now what was your brother doing? Because your brother was there at the same time.
Right. Yeah. So he was a little further in away from Pakistan. He was still near enough to the border, I think, but not as close as I was. I was like basically sitting right on it. He was a little further in. But they were getting hammered where they were. They actually had days where they were down to the point where they could count how much food they had in, you know, like how many more meals do we have left to be able to serve to the people here, because they couldn't get resupplies coming into their base because it was just so dangerous around that area that the helicopters were not flying in to the base, and the vehicle traffic, they were getting hit with IEDs and RPGs and stuff like that. So they were, it was very, very tough for them because they just weren't getting what they needed. You know, even, you know, when they go out on patrols, they were getting hit all the time. They were getting into firefights and things like that. So it was tough for them. They had a really rough time, and the base that they're on was pretty remote. So it wasn't like they could just, you know, hop in their vehicles and go drive to the next base to go get a resupply kind of thing. It was,
they're very reliant
it was
on
out
everybody else. Yeah,
that's
crazy.
Yeah. So so yeah, I honestly didn't get to talk to him much while we were there. Most of my communication with him came third party. So it'd be like when I would call home and talk to my parents or my wife or something like that, they would tell me what he told them and vice versa. So we didn't really get a chance to talk. As a matter of fact, we didn't talk at all on the phone. We sent a couple of emails back and forth to each other. Nothing really significant. Obviously, you can't send, you know, sensitive information through email. So we kind of just, you know, hey, how's it going? You hear about the you know, the Yankees or, you know, whatever, you know, just like stupid stuff like that like just to kind of catch up and that type of stuff. You know, what's it like over there and that kind of stuff. So so really, that was about the extent of our communication, going back and forth, and which kind of sucked. In a way, I wanted to be able to be in communication with him and know what he was doing and stuff. But at the same time, I knew he had a job to do. I had a job to do, and we needed to just kind of focus on those jobs so we could make it back home.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I don't want to give away anything, but you know, what did you learn on what ended up happening to your brother?
Yeah, so that's kind of the next part of the story, and so the day, let's see, how do I want to put this? So we were out on a mission one day, and this was in late August, and we were in a remote village, and we were just kind of clearing the village of you know, to make sure that the Taliban wasn't using it as a, you know, stronghold, or, you know, that they were hiding weapons and all that kind of stuff. So that was our job that day, was go through the village and kind of clear it. And later on that day, I got a call on the radio saying that our commanding officer was looking for me. And for anyone who's listening who knows anything about the chain of command, knows that the commanding officer usually isn't going to go directly to an E5 sergeant and ask for them directly. They're usually going to send a message through the chain of command, but this wasn't the case. And so when that kind of thing happens, it's usually you did something really good or something really got screwed up. And I was like, okay, I just kind of did my job. I wasn't like getting any medals or anything today for anything I had done. So nothing spectacular happened today. I didn't think I screwed anything up, but then I started doubting myself, and I was running through this checklist in my mind of all the things that could have gone wrong. And I'm like, okay, what went wrong? And I couldn't figure it out. So eventually I linked up with the commanding officer, and he told me to kind of come over to the side away from everybody else. There was some like trees and rocks and stuff over there. And he told me to take a knee and take my helmet off. And I was like, oof. Like, you never take your helmet off when you're outside the wire. Like that's like a huge no-no. And he's telling me to do this like that. Like, what is wrong? Like, did I screw up that bad that he wants me to get shot or something? Like is that how bad this is? But I started getting worried at that point. I was like, okay, something's up. And so he told me that my brother's unit had been ambushed and that my brother had gotten hit. And now up until this point, I had never even considered the possibility that my brother would be seriously injured or killed in combat. Just because that's something that happens to other people. That doesn't happen to you.
And then maybe even the irony of them even knowing that your brother was there. Like, do they kind of know that relatives and
I knew that we're in the same brigade, and so there was some way that they could probably figure that out. And so it wasn't that far out of the realm of possibility to me that a message would have gotten to me saying that something happened to him. And so at this point, after he told me that my brother got hit, I'm thinking, okay, he's wounded.
Yeah.
Okay. How do I get to him for, moral support, or does he need like a blood transfusion or, a kidney or something like that? You know what I mean? Like get me to him so I could be there and get him whatever he needs. And my commanding officer looked at me like I was nuts. And he's like, no, I don't think you understand what I'm trying to tell you. Your brother's been killed. And that was like a punch in the gut. I felt like my whole world just started crashing down, and like nothing seemed to make sense. Like I couldn't even understand the words that was coming out of his mouth. Like it just didn't make sense to me. And, naturally, like anyone else, I broke down. I started crying, and I was a mess. He asked me if I was going to be okay. And, was I going to do anything stupid, hurt myself or somebody else or anything, which was a legit question because I had a loaded rifle and I totally could have hurt just about anybody I wanted to.
It's so crazy though. That's their first like, okay, are you gonna go crazy on us? Or
it's in my notes, right? Literally that statement. Are you gonna hurt yourself?
That's I mean,
because even you say you're like, that's something that you don't think about. Like, am I gonna go turn the turn on my unit or
Yeah. I mean, there were
real.
Yeah.
The mission that we were on, we had Afghan army soldiers with us. We had interpreters, so there were a lot of like Afghans with us, like within arm's length almost, that I easily could have turned on and like just blamed all them and just started. That wouldn't have helped anything though. That would have just made things so much worse. And I actually got a little pissed off at the commanding officer because I was like, my brother just died. How could I go do something stupid like that and risk my own life and end up having my parents get a second knock on the door and find out that their other son was killed? Like that's just no way. I couldn't do that. And about 20 minutes after I found out that my brother was killed, our own unit started taking fire from the village that we had just come out of. And so the grief that I felt and the sadness turned to straight, like just pure anger. It went to anger. And I wanted to go and like just hurt somebody. Like I was at that point where I wanted to. And but I realized again, that wasn't going to solve anything. It wasn't going to bring my brother back. It wasn't going to make anything any better. If anything, it was going to make it worse. And so I said, okay, I just need to get my head on straight. I need to put the grief stuff aside for now and just focus on the job. Very like robotic thinking. Like put that
military
over there.
It's
in that
military
box.
thinking, right? You
Yeah.
compartmentalize it and go on.
Yeah. Well,
and just focus. Yeah, exactly. Focus on the mission at hand. Right.
Wow.
So
how long before you are you given time to be with your family after, and how long?
Yeah.
What's that time frame look like?
Yeah, so after the firefight was over, they got a helicopter in to fly me and a couple of soldiers who were wounded to fly us out of there, and um, I flew to Bagram Air Base, which is like the main air base in Afghanistan. It was all in the news last year with
Right.
the withdrawal from Afghanistan.
Yep.
So I was there, and the next morning I flew out of Afghanistan. I flew out on the same plane that my brother was on, and so I was able to escort him to Kuwait. Then from there he went off. I'm not sure exactly where he went. They took him someplace else, and I was on the next flight out of Kuwait to come back home. So I was home. Let's see. That next day, probably like 2 days after he was killed,
Wow.
I was home in Connecticut. So really no time to decompress whatsoever. There, a lot of times, guys coming home, they have a few weeks. Like the turnaround time to get someone home is usually a lot longer than like 2 days. It usually takes quite some time to get, especially when you're traveling, like a whole unit is traveling. It takes a little bit more time. Could take upwards of a week or more to get them from Afghanistan to Kuwait or wherever it is that they're going, and then to their next destination. A lot of times it's Ireland or Germany or someplace else, and then back to the United States. So it just waiting for flights and all that kind of stuff is usually a little time consuming.
Well, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I mean, I'm just trying to take it in my own mind, and you lived through it. You went from 1 minute being told your brother's just been killed to within minutes of that being in a firefight to wrapping that up and maybe not even fully wrapping it up and getting on a helicopter, escorting, going to Kuwait, flying with your brother, and then going home to deal with all this, all in 48 hours. Less than 48 hours, it actually sounds like.
Yeah.
Like that's just, I mean, normal people, you don't deal with that. That's not something you should deal with, right?
No, it was a really quick turnaround, and it was just, it was like you said, you shouldn't have to deal with things that way. And I think that sort of contributed to some of the issues that I had later on, because I didn't have any of that time to decompress. And, a lot of the guys coming back, they have a lot longer to decompress. They're hanging out, in the barracks with people in Kuwait, just waiting for their flight. And they're able to just shoot the breeze and just have a conversation, talk to people who were there with them and stuff. And you think going back generations, like World War II, they're coming back from Europe on ships that take a week or more to travel across the ocean, right? And so they had all that time where they were able to just kind of decompress too.
It's not a happy homecoming.
Yeah,
not a happy.
No, it wasn't,
right? You have to go console your whole family, yourself, his family, your parents. I mean, it's just
the layers and layers of grief and how
just that onion keeps getting peeled back, right? I mean, it's just crazy. Sorry, I'm so focused on, I couldn't even imagine that. That's where, when we wonder what you guys go through, we can't even understand, because just something like that is so big and so just crazy.
Yeah, and initially when I was sent home, they told me that I was only gonna have 2 weeks at home, and I was when they told me that, I was like, "There's no way! Like, I don't know how I can go back to Afghanistan at this point. Like, my head is not okay, and I don't know how I can do that." And at my brother's funeral, let me actually take a step back. So for the people who aren't familiar, the National Guard, unlike the active duty military, the National Guard has really two commanders in chief: the governor of whatever state you're from, and then the president of the United States. So the governor of the state of Connecticut came to my brother's funeral, and she told my family that that she was going to issue an order that I do not go back to Afghanistan.
Oh, wow.
So I was fortunate in that respect, because I don't know honestly, if I did go back, how I would be able to manage being back over there. And not to mention that, but I don't know how my family would have managed either, because it would have just torn them apart, just worrying about, are we going to get another knock on the door? Is Scott going to be okay? And I saw it even after I came back home, and I would go back to training. Every time I put the uniform on, it was just that look of worry.
Right.
Even though I wasn't deploying, I wasn't going anywhere. I was just going to, go do some training. It was just still that look of worry. And, no parent should have to worry like that about their kid.
No.
Especially after dealing with that already,
Right.
So,
well, because if you were in active duty, you probably would have ended up back, because nobody would have stopped those orders, right? So
no, exactly. Yeah,
you were where you were meant to be. I mean, that's the way I feel about it. Like,
did your brother have he had a girlfriend, right? Did you say girlfriend?
He was engaged to be married, but before he deployed, he was going to get married a little over a year after he was killed. So he unfortunately never had a chance to get married.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry, I was again squirrel. I sidetracked because you have an upcoming episode tomorrow, I believe. Or is that today? And it was talking about resilience in military kids. And I know you obviously shared with your kids, and the memory of their uncle. And I know that's a big thing. Like, that's going to be something that they will always remember and hold dear. I mean, that's kind of how your family's threaded together, I guess.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, with my kids, I take, they're young. My oldest is 13, youngest is 9. So, I mean, they're old enough now to kind of understand that there is war, that people go and fight and die and things like that. And so I have shared with them, the stuff that I could with them, as far as, what happened to their uncle and all that kind of stuff. And I not just share like the sad stuff, the negative things, but I talk about what type of person he was, and the funny things that he would do, and different stories and stuff like that, and try to keep his memory alive. That's why I'm here tonight, to talk to you guys, is to help keep his memory alive. It's why I wrote the book that I wrote.
Absolutely.
To have something that will outlive not only him, but it'll outlive me too. And it's a way that people will be able to pick this up years from now and understand the sacrifices that military families make when they send their sons and daughters off to war.
Yeah, it's a great tribute. It's a great tribute, and I know he's looking down and he's proud of what you've done to be able to put the experiences that you have, and because you said it a couple times, or in your book and a couple different interviews, that getting help was the biggest issue that you had, right? Like, knowing that you're like, we always say it's okay not to be okay. But I want to bring up the one quote that you had. You said, you need to have people close to you that care enough about you to tell you you have a problem and help you seek out the care that you need. To me, I literally wrote that down, because it's okay to say, dude, you got a problem, and be boom, like, period. That's the end of the sentence. But the problem is there's not that person say, dude, go get help. You're a grown man, go get help. Like, you need help, go get help. But you have people around you that care enough to be like, hey, listen, I'm going to hold your hand. I'm going to take you here where I'm going to go with you while you get help.
Right.
So,
when I eventually did get help, because I put it off so long, I was one of those thick-headed guys that I was just like, you know what, I'll deal with this. It'll get better. It'll be fine. I'll be all right. But I wasn't all right. Nothing got better. Like, things just, as a matter of fact, it started getting worse. And so the more and more I put it off, the more and more it became obvious that I needed to get some sort of help. But the reason why I think I put that quote in there that you just mentioned is because when I picked up the phone to call to get help, it was scary. Like I didn't know what to expect from that first meeting with whoever I was going to see.
Yeah.
I like when I say I had no idea, I didn't know if I was walking in and they were going to strap me up and put me in a padded room and like pump me full of drugs. I had no idea at all what to expect. I just knew that whatever it was, I needed it. I needed something. Yeah. And so my wife, she was an absolute saint through this whole entire process. I mean, she wasn't like, one of those wives who just nags and like gets you, oh, you got to go do this thing, and making all these ultimatums and all this. She was great. She told me, hey, this isn't good. This isn't right. You need to get some help. And she let me kind of approach it on my own terms. Didn't like push me so hard that I start pushing back. You know what I mean? Right. Like when someone tells you need to do this, and you're like, I'm going to not do it that much harder because you're telling me that I need to do it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So she did,
hey, you need help.
Period. Like,
yeah. Boom. Yeah. And like I said, it's a great quote. It needs to be on a pillow, needs to be handwritten note on your wall, right? Because it's, hey, you need help, but I'm going to be here with you and take you and go help you. And the podcast that I was listening to is with Dr. Vicky Matthews, and she said, hey, listen, I've seen a lot, I've heard a lot, and I've helped a lot. Right. And I was kind of getting some things from that podcast and just sitting there listening to it. And I'm like, yeah, like it's okay. Like we say it all the time. It's okay not to be okay, but you need that support to kind of push you along. And that was, to me, that was something. And having, your wife being like, look, and I know like you ain't the same person, but I'm going to be here for you and I'm going to help you.
Right.
Well, and
the thing is,
sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, it's all you.
Yeah. The thing for me though, is if I wasn't married at that time, if I didn't know my wife, I didn't have any kids or anything like that, I don't know that I would have been strong enough on my own to go and do the thing that I needed to do to get better. And so, who knows where I would have been after all of this? Would I have, gone the self-medicated route and just, become, homeless and a junkie and all that kind of stuff? Like, who knows where I would have ended up being? And so, I literally owe everything that I have to my wife and to my family for being there and being supportive for me.
Yeah, no,
that's awesome.
It's what a lot of people, and we've done, this is the 46th episode that we've had, and we've seen we've listened to and had just an array, right? I mean, we've had single guys dealing with stuff, and we've had self-medicating, and we've had, being locked in a room for days at a time, not knowing how to deal with it,
Yep.
Right.
Fortunately, everyone that we've talked to is still breathing and still was able to get help when they needed it. Right. And that's kind of like what we do here. Mike and I, we say every episode, we aren't military, but I love listening to the stories and giving back and being able to have this platform to tell the stories. And we just always bring up also that there's programs out there for people. Like there's programs out there, 988, 22 Mohawks. There's,
actually, if you go, since we're talking about Scott, if you go to driveonpodcast.com, you can actually, he has a resources page and he lists all those. I was going to say, and on that's the thing about the Drive On podcast is it opens up everything and it shows you like, hey, listen, come to my podcast and listen to Drive On Podcast with Scott DeLuzio. Right. And here's, like, as you're listening, go do the resources, and he has a ton of things on there. Like, it's very well done. I mean, it's amazing what you have going. So, I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate that you guys mentioned that. And I put that resources page together because I know that first off, we could talk about these things on the podcast. Yeah. I've got 250 some odd episodes recorded. We can talk about all these different things, and it's good because we can get into depth on what a particular program has to offer or whatever.
Yeah.
And some things are better for some people than others. You know, there might be someone who responds very well to something like art therapy or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. There might be someone else who absolutely hates it and doesn't ever want to do that. Okay, cool. There's something else for that person. And so whenever I come across a resource that seems legit, it's got something worthwhile to offer to people, I put it out there on the resources page. And it's not just, you know, anybody who you know, just like random Google searches and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Just whatever shows up. It's stuff that I've either talked to the people who run the organizations or are associated with it, or people who've been through the programs and can attest, like, yeah, this is legit. It's good. It works. And there are tons of resources there. There's things like, you know, 988, like you mentioned, but there's also just these nonprofit organizations that do things in a wide variety of different ways. Like there's PTSD therapy using surfing, for example. I had them on the podcast. Actually, I don't think that episode's come out yet, but there's equestrian, you know, using horses to treat PTSD. There's so many things, and there's career resources. So if you're having trouble finding a job, guess what? There's people out there who will help you write a resume. They'll help you practice like job interviews. They'll help you get a suit if you've never worn a suit before other than your military uniform. They'll help you get a suit. They'll help you, you know, just get in touch with people, to network with people. There's so many different things. So I try to put all these things on the website and trying to organize them in some way that it's, you know, sort of logical, so you can figure out what it is that you need. But again, because there's so many different people out there with so many different needs and so many different ways of doing things, I put all of these resources together so that they can find the thing that works for them. And I always tell people, if you've been in a position that you're looking for some sort of help and you've tried something, you're like, that doesn't work for me, nothing's ever going to work for me. Well, you're wrong. There's so many things out there. Keep trying. Try one thing. It doesn't work for you. All right, cool. All that did is tell you that one thing doesn't work, and you don't have to waste your time on that anymore. Move on to the next thing, and then keep trying things until you find something that works. And I guarantee you there is something out there for you. It may not be the thing that you find in your first go or second, third, even fourth, fifth go around. You might take some time to figure it out, but as you're doing that, you're learning stuff about yourself too. And as you learn more about yourself, you'll start to figure out more and more about what will work with you.
Well, this is exactly why we did this show, is trying to get all these different angles and these different groups. And I do want to put something on your radar called SITREP 22. It's in the works. It's actually one of our guests. And he does have an Instagram going right now, but we are in the early stages of an app that is going to do everything to address. He got very passionate on our show about awareness, right? Because I noticed, like, on your homepage and you on your About Us, you talk about your service, obviously losing your brother, but one of the reasons you started your show was you lost some brothers too in the service due to suicide. And and Tom, he's a Marine veteran, 20-year veteran, and he started spouting out some amazing ideas. I'm like, stop, let's stop. We're gonna actually figure out how to put this together. And we have, 22 Mohawks. Eric just mentioned them, is a group we've had on our show who's doing amazing things. They do dogs, but they also, one of the things they do is they do a parachuting
so
fundraiser.
22, so they want to get 22 skydivers in all 50 states. And there's one date, and I can't remember the date offhand, and they want to get, so that's going to be 100.
That's like one of our challenges is we want to get
50,
because right now they're mainly
jumpers
on the East Coast. They're in Massachusetts. So trying to get people parachuting all across the country at the same time just for veteran suicide awareness would be amazing. It would be absolutely amazing. But
that's cool.
That's what I think that's where we're at, is we try to get people that are really, genuine about their message, genuine about what they're doing. And like I said, SITREP 22, it's we're working on clothing coming to help pay for some of the back end of getting the app built, because that's not going to be an overnight thing.
Yeah.
But we are, and it kind of speaks to what you said, is it's going to be an open book. And that's what I just explained to Tom. This is going to be a living, breathing thing, because you have your ideas, but as we talk to more people, we'll learn, oh, well, this person dealt with this. How can we adjust that to meet that?
Yeah.
So you having your resources helps us, because that's what we want. Just one page that's going to be, by state, by city, give them all the resources. Obviously 988's on there. Everything's going to be on there, but we want to build something to where these men and women aren't by themselves. And if they are by themselves, they have that phone, and that phone can hopefully make that difference, and that app can make that difference. So I love the way you built it. I love that. I do want to talk about the podcast, which is, again, the Drive On podcast, which is available across all podcasting sites. I mean, he has, if you go to the website, has them all linked there. You can and on YouTube. You started it to talk about this, right? Did you start it because of more the angle with sorry, that's the wrong word. Did you talk about it to talk about what you dealt with your brother more so, or the suicide and the awareness around that first?
Originally it started because, obviously losing one friend to suicide was like too many. And then when there were more people that I knew started taking their own lives, I was like, I can't just sit around and wait for that next phone call to say, somebody else that I knew and I cared about and I, that fought with and stuff, that they took their lives too. I mean, they literally survived being in a place where people wanted them to die, and they came home to a place where people wanted them to survive and thrive and be great, and that's where they died. Like, that didn't compute with me. And so I wanted to figure out a way to reach as many people as I possibly could. And I said, podcast is a great way to do that. Low barrier to entry. It doesn't cost anything for the listeners to do that. They just need to, as long as they can get on the internet, they can listen to the podcast.
Yeah.
That's really the only obstacle for them. And so that was just too easy, I thought. And so I said, let me start this podcast to help address this issue, because I realized it wasn't just the guys that I served with. It was widespread across the entire military and veteran community. And so the idea was to help address this issues, to help reduce the number of people who are taking their own lives, and provide them with a couple things. One is provide stories of other veterans who have gone through some sort of experience. It could be some traumatic deployment experience. It could be, even something at home. It could be, someone who got, raped or something like that at home on a military base or whatever. They went through something. A lot of the listeners went through very similar things. And if they were able to get through that experience and come out okay on the other side of that experience, then that should give hope to the listeners to know that they could get through this as well. Maybe they haven't figured out their path through this yet, but there is hope that they can get through this. And then we also talked to a lot of these organizations that are listed on my site. We talk to representatives or from the organization itself, or people who've gone through their program. And we talk about these different resources, again, to shed light on what is even out there. Because, how do you Google for some of this stuff? Like, if you don't know that art therapy is even a thing, how do you Google that? Like, where do you come up with that? And so, this is really just a way to give ideas to people for things that could work. Some of the things that I have listed are local resources. Like, they may only be available in Florida. And if you live in Washington State, you're not going to get in the car and drive to Florida to go do that. But there may very well be that same very similar thing in your area too, right?
You could go to alternate therapies and resources, scroll down to the bottom and click on Warrior Surf Foundation if you're in Wholly, South Carolina.
Well,
I mean, there's so many.
I mean, it's what's awesome is that first off, he's talking about it. So hopefully those people are listening.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the whole goal, I think, to all of our shows is that if we can get one person listening and they hear something that changes their life, then, you know, we've started to do our job.
Yeah.
Started. We're not there, but because when somebody's in the middle of something, they're not going to go Google that help by any means, right?
And that's the thing we kind of hang our hat on. I've talked about it before. You know, now it's been a couple of months ago where a friend of mine knew that we do this, and we were talking to veterans and the programs that we find or help find. And he's like, hey, I got this guy back east, and you know, and long story short is we eventually got this guy some help. We went through different chain of different people that we've talked to and finally got help for him. And it's just, it's what we do. Right. I mean, this is our give back, you know, letting you guys have the platform to share your message. And again, Drive On podcast with Scott DeLuzio. I mean, there's so many resources to listen to. It's awesome.
Well, and you're absolutely right too, because the resources are there. We'd love for the veterans themselves who are having the issues to be able to be like that first touch to be like, okay, when you're in that position that I was in back 12 years ago or so, when I realized I needed to get help, I wanted to have a list of resources available that I could go and look through. And if you're in that position, that list of resources is available. But like you said, not everybody who's in that position is going to be out there Googling stuff for themselves. But you very well may have a spouse or, you know, a parent or a child or somebody in their lives who's like, I got to help this guy out. Like the quote that you read earlier, you know, there's someone going to be there who's going to be like, okay, not only am I going to tell you that you need some help, but I'm going to help you find it. And that's what these resources are there for. So it's really there for anyone to take a look through and see what you can find that might resonate with the person in your life.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
Well, when I'm not sick and I can't even think, I'm going to be listening to the book because I'm very much looking forward to it, getting to hear the author tell a little bit of the story and then getting to hear your voice retell it because I can't read. I fall asleep reading, but I can listen with no problem. So I'm very much looking forward to listening to it. Scott, so I got the hardest question of the night now, right? So we wouldn't put you in a corner. We're going to kind of corner you for a second. You and the wife are relaxing. What's the go-to? And this guy, what's the go-to drink?
Oh, the go-to drink. Okay. So he was kind of like preempting that question just before there, right?
I got to give you a little pre-story on it because there was a lot of guests, and one time he put tea with sugar.
That's called sweet tea.
Yeah, he put tea with sugar, so it's always kind of a joke. And then the minute I ask the question, he goes and takes the drink. So yeah, it was.
I told you.
So what's the go-to drink when you and the wife are just finally getting to relax and hang out? And what do you guys drink?
You know, I'm a beer drinker. I do like beer. You know, I talk about it in the book just for the people who are listening and may have already read the book. I talk about issues that I've had with alcohol in the past. Okay. You know, it's not what I was doing before was just it was just really trying to get through that time period. And so it's not like an alcoholic kind of thing where I was, you know, had an issue with where it was like uncontrollable. It was just a coping mechanism at the time. And, you know, so for people who are listening to this and like, oh my gosh, he's drinking again or whatever. Like, no, it's not that, that kind of thing. So yeah, I am a beer drinker. I like dark beers, like
craft guy or
craft beers are good. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
actually,
I do like
beer stop over here.
I do like to travel too. Like when I'm traveling, when I go to a different place, I always want to try like the beer that you're not going to get at home,
right?
Like, stuff that's local to that area,
Absolutely.
and that to me is like just a fun thing to do.
Yeah. So does the wife enjoy beer too?
Well, she actually doesn't drink. She had a few years ago, she had some medical issues, and the medication that she's on now just doesn't work with alcohol. So she hasn't been drinking for a few years now. So, you know, So it's really just me drinking alone. But yeah, she's more of the iced tea or like those sparkling water kind of drinks or whatever. So so that's kind of her thing.
We know we're talking to veterans, and that's why we ask, because sometimes it is just, we've had somebody say it's water, and it's because they've gone through exactly what you were saying, and alcohol is no longer part of their life because it was a negative part of their life. So everybody, everybody's story is a little different, and I wouldn't look at you as an alcoholic for having a beer here and there.
Right.
I don't think that's fair at all, especially because it seems. And I don't ever want to assume it. It seems you found your way through a lot of this, and having the show, writing the book, you found a lot of ways to cope with what you've dealt with and what you've been through. So I think you have that right to that beer once in a while.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah. And I only put that out there just because I know there are people who are eventually going to read the book and, or maybe already have. And, I don't want the questions coming in like, oh, are you doing all right now? Whatever. Like, no, it's all good. I got it under control. It's not like not even like a nightly thing or anything. It's just every once in a while. It's healthy, So.
Right. Well, and our whole goal is, we don't want to take away from the book, but we wanted to highlight the book, highlight your story, highlight your podcast, and the things you're doing for the veteran community. As somebody that lived through it, it's not, we don't have that ability. We just get to share the stories, and we get to give, other veterans and you the ability to talk about it, which you already have your platform. We just get to share you on our platform now, which is awesome. So we do, we want to thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your service. I will be posting Surviving Son. I'll post the link. Is it better to post the direct link or the Amazon link? I'm trying to get you paid too. We're all about that.
Yeah, I mean, either one works. Honestly, I put the website that's out there, the survivingsonbook.com, is there because and this blew my mind when I first published the book. I had people start asking me like for signed copies, and like through Amazon, that's kind of hard. You can't do that, right? So I was like, wait, like someone actually wants a signed copy of this thing. So that, if you go through the survivingsonbook.com, you can get it both ways. You can get it signed or unsigned, didn't matter, from that website. But that's really what I set it up for originally, was just to sell the signed copies, because people needed a way to do that. And so that's where that came from. But
yeah, he had a funny little comment. He goes, you can't get a signed bookmarker on an audiobook. It's kind of hard to use a bookmarker on an audiobook, right? So my order is going to be coming through pretty soon. Okay, for that autograph.
We gotta have both. We gotta have the signed and the audio version.
Yeah, we're gonna start a little collection over here.
We're not that Mart over here. We don't read them books. We can listen to them.
It's the ADD or it's the.
I don't know. I'm the same way though. I like books. I like the content, but I just prefer to listen to them. I listen to books like if I'm exercising or driving in the car or something like that. That's when I would want to listen to a book, and I can't do that very well while I'm using a physical copy of a book. So, that's why I did the audiobook too, because I was like, I wouldn't buy the book to read it, because I don't typically buy books to read. Typically I buy the audiobook. So if you like to read the physical copy, there's hardcover and paperback versions. There's the ebook, the Kindle version, and now the audiobook came out earlier this year.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Real quick, last comment. So have you been to State 48 Brewery yet? Is that a go-to place up there?
You know what? I am kind of embarrassed that I have not been there.
It's only got 4.5 stars. It's like northeast of you. Go get the US 60 stout. Go get the US 60 stout. It's an Oakville stout.
So you've been there?
It sounds great.
I may have had some people get some stuff before.
It's only a few miles from my house, so I honestly am kind of embarrassed that but it's like one of those things where like you live in an area and it's just like that is just the place that's on the corner. Like you don't even think about it.
We already made the Hope City connection with your son and Matt Pulido. Right. So
hey, that's all right. We live an hour and a half from Yosemite, and I've literally taken my family like one time.
Yeah.
It took us I think it was like 5 or 6 years for us living here in Arizona to finally get to the Grand Canyon.
Oh,
So
wow.
I get it.
That's awesome. Hey, Scott, thank you so much, man. I'm so glad you answered my email.
Yes.
If there's anything we can do, let us know, tag us. And, hey, if you have an opening, I mean, we're not veterans, but we would love to be.
He's putting his sophisticated glasses on now.
We'd love to.
I could be sophisticated too.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying.
But don't reach out till I get rid of this if there's any interest.
You got it.
Because I don't want to be hacking on your show. I'm already embarrassed that I had to do that today. Yeah. I feel terrible, but I did not want to miss out on this. So we appreciate your time.
I really appreciate this opportunity to come on your guys' show and share my story with you and your listeners. So thank you guys for the invitation and the opportunity to come on.
Absolutely, man.
We'll do it again.
Absolutely. We'll have to talk about new stuff.
Yeah.
His next book. No, just kidding.
Yeah.
No pressure.
Yeah. No pressure, right?
Yeah. Well, Scott, you have a wonderful evening. Tell your wife thank you for letting us borrow you for some time, and go enjoy the family.
Okay.
Thank you, Scott.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Go Army, beat Navy. I can't say that.
It already happened.
I know.
Navy's coach.
And then he resigned.
Yeah, well, whatever.
15 years.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
Coach. Man, you just keep doing it.
Yeah, man. It's it's fun to finally, I mean, that one's been set for a while. I mean, and there's so much stuff that guy, I mean, we could have went on for more. And
well, we want to highlight his book because the goal is help him get people to get out and read it.
I mean, you could have done an hour and a half on his website, with all the programs and stuff.
For sure.
But that's the cool part. Now we're starting to get to the point where we're starting to overlap some people, and I'm blanking on his name, so I'm not going to bring it up right now. But yeah, dude, Arizona's the hotbed because people are moving to Arizona and helping out with the VA. Coughlin is out there now. Yeah. So
he's out there now?
Yeah.
Okay.
He moved out there, and I apologize. I'm
Andrew
Coughlin. Yes. Thank you. I know. Wounded Warrior.
I got you. Wounded Warrior. Shout out to Andrew Coughlin.
Shout out.
Wounded Warrior Project. Well, buddy.
You made it, bro. Only 2, 7, 20, 39 coughs. 34 coughs.
Shut up. I'm gonna end up having a coughing attack to where I pass out after
Deuces.
All right, buddy. Well, don't get me that quick, man. I gotta at least be ready.
Oh, we gotta get our
nah, I'm not worried about it.
No, please.
No.
Please.
No, I gotta go. Gotta go.
Okay.
Eric, deuces.
Deuces.